The once gentle and considerate her now often seemed distracted and even a bit irritable. I tried to communicate with her, asking if there was anything troubling her recently. But she always brushed it off, saying she was just too tired. My heart was filled with doubt and unease, but I didn't know what to do. Finally, on a weekend, I mustered the courage to pick up her phone, enter the password, and the screen unlocked. My hands were trembling slightly, and I took a deep breath before opening the call log. A series of unfamiliar numbers caught my eye, with an alarmingly high frequency of calls. Some of the calls even lasted for hours, often late at night or in the early morning. My heart sank to the bottom. Could she really be having an affair? Just as I was about to check the text messages, footsteps came from the kitchen. I hurriedly put down the phone and pretended to be watching TV. My wife walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee, a gentle smile on her face. "Darling, I made you a cup of coffee," she said softly. I forced a smile, but inside, my emotions were in turmoil. At that moment, I wished it was all just a bad dream. But the reality was right in front of me, leaving no room for escape. In the days that followed, I began to secretly observe my wife's every move. I noticed that she often received mysterious packages. Each time, she would carefully hide them after opening. A few times, I tried to search for them when she wasn't home, but I always came up empty-handed. I started to suspect, was she involved in something illegal? The thought sent a chill down my spine. I couldn't believe that my gentle wife would do such a thing. Yet, the signs before me made it impossible not to doubt. I was caught in a painful struggle, unsure of what to do. Finally, I decided to confide in a close friend and seek advice. He said with a serious expression, "Bro, you need to hire a detective. This is not something to be taken lightly. What if she really cheats on you?" I shook my head and replied, "No, I want to investigate this myself. I know her well. If there's really something going on, I'll find out." My friend sighed and patted my shoulder. "Then be careful, don't alert the enemy." I nodded, already having a plan in mind. The next day, I lied about working overtime, but in reality, I was hiding in my car, keeping watch. Sure enough, as soon as it got dark, my wife drove out. I quietly followed her, my heart pounding wildly. The car twisted and turned, finally stopping in front of a remote warehouse. I parked my car in the shadows and watched as my wife entered the warehouse. After about half an hour, a black sedan arrived. A tall man got out of the car and also entered the warehouse. My heart tightened. Could it really be as I suspected? Summoning my courage, I tiptoed closer to the warehouse. Through the slightly open door, I saw my wife talking to the man. Their voices were low, and I could only catch a few words. Words like goods, deal, and time kept coming up. My mind was filled with all sorts of terrifying speculations. Could my wife really be involved in illegal activities? Just as I was lost in thought, the conversation inside the warehouse seemed to come to an end. I quickly hid to the side and watched as the man hurriedly left. My wife stayed in the warehouse for a while longer before coming out. She looked around cautiously, then quickly walked to her car. Only when her car disappeared into the night did I finally breathe a sigh of relief. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to take the risk and go inside to have a look. The warehouse was pitch black, so I fumbled to turn on my phone's flashlight. The sight before me made me gasp. The entire warehouse was filled with various medical equipment and supplies. Some boxes were even labeled fragile. I carefully examined them, and my confusion grew deeper. Suddenly, a document caught my attention. With trembling hands, I opened it, and there it was, a record of organ transplant surgeries. My mind buzzed, and I could hardly think. Could my wife really be involved in something illegal? The thought is too terrifying to accept. I forced myself to calm down and carefully inspected the entire warehouse. Besides the medical equipment, there were also large quantities of medicine and some documents. Although I couldn't fully understand them, my intuition told me that none of this was normal. I took some photos with my phone and then hurriedly left the warehouse. On the drive home, my mind was in complete chaos. Should I believe the evidence before my eyes, or should I trust the wife I've loved for so many years? When I got home, my wife was already asleep. I tiptoed into bed, but tossed and turned, unable to fall asleep. The next morning, I forced myself to stay calm, pretending as if nothing had happened. My wife didn't seem to notice anything unusual either, still busily preparing breakfast as usual. Watching her familiar figure, my heart was filled with mixed emotions. Was this really the woman I thought I knew? In the days that followed, I began secretly gathering evidence. I checked my wife's bank account and discovered large, suspicious deposits. The source of the money was unclear, but the amounts were staggering. I also rummaged through her old belongings, hoping to find some clues. Among a pile of old documents, I found a work contract from her previous job. It showed that she had once worked at a clinic. When I looked up information about that clinic, I was shocked to find that it had long since shut down. Even more alarming, there were rumors online that it had been an illegal operation. This discovery sent chills down my spine. Could everything be connected? I decided to dig deeper, but my heart was filled with fear and unease. How could I face this potential revelation that might upend my life? Was the woman I loved truly a criminal? I told my wife that I needed to go on a business trip for a few days, but in reality, it was an excuse to secretly follow her. "Darling, this trip might take 5 or 6 days. Be careful while I'm away," I said, pretending everything was normal. My wife smiled and nodded. "Don't worry, I'll take care of myself." Looking at her gentle smile, my heart tightened, unsure of what lay hidden behind that smile. I drove away from home and found a secluded spot nearby to quietly wait for my wife to leave the house. Sure enough, it wasn't long before my wife drove out. I cautiously followed behind, afraid of being discovered. Her car eventually stopped in front of an ordinary office building. I watched her enter the building, hesitating whether to follow her inside. In the end, I decided to wait outside and observe who else might come. Before long, several strangers entered the building one after another. They all looked ordinary, but there was an indescribable sense of strangeness about them. After about an hour, my wife and those people walked out together. They seemed to be engaged in an animated discussion, their faces filled with excitement. I hid in the car, straining to hear what they were saying. Faintly, I caught words like cargo and surgery date. These terms made my heart sink. Could it really be as I had feared? I watched as my wife and those people parted ways, then drove off. I hesitated for a moment, deciding to return home a few hours later. On the way, my mind kept replaying the scene I had just witnessed. Who were those strangers? What were they discussing? Why use a word like cargo? Various terrifying speculations swirled in my mind, making it almost impossible to think clearly. When I got home, I chatted with my wife as if nothing had happened. Did your business trip go well? My wife asked. I forced myself to appear calm. It was okay, just a bit tiring. Then you should rest early. I'll get you a glass of water, my wife said gently. Watching her retreating figure, my heart was filled with conflict and pain. Should I trust this gentle and caring wife before my eyes, or believe what I had seen? The next day, I made an excuse about leaving something at the office and secretly sneaked into my wife's office. I carefully searched through her things, hoping to find some clues. Suddenly, an encrypted file caught my attention. After a few attempts, I finally guessed the password. It was our wedding anniversary. This discovery left me with mixed feelings, both touched and terrified. When I opened the file, my world completely collapsed. This is an inventory, with prices and transaction dates for various organs. My hands trembled as I scrolled down, and suddenly, I saw a familiar name of my own. My name was clearly listed under pending, with kidney and cornea noted beside it. This discovery sent a chill through my body, and I nearly fainted on the spot. Could my wife really be planning to sell my organs? I calmed myself down and carefully reviewed the entire document. It meticulously recorded every transaction, and the amounts were so large that they left me utterly astonished. I used my phone to capture this evidence and then quickly left the office. On my way home, my mind was in complete chaos, unable to think clearly. What should I do? Should I report it to the police? But what evidence do I have? Moreover, if my wife is really involved in such criminal activities, would she already be on guard? I began to worry about my own safety. Every night, I would wake up several times in fear, afraid that my wife might suddenly make a move against me. I started becoming paranoid, suspicious of every action my wife took. You've been so absent-minded lately. What's wrong? My wife asked with concern. I forced a smile. Maybe it's just the stress from work. Do you want to see a doctor? I know a very good one, my wife suggested. Hearing the word doctor, my heart suddenly raced. No need, I'll rest for a few days and be fine, I hurriedly declined. My wife gave me a puzzled look but didn't say anything more. I knew I had to act quickly, or my life might be in danger. I decided to gather more evidence to prepare for reporting to the police. I installed hidden recording devices in several key locations around the house. Every night, I would carefully listen to the recordings. Most of the time, they were just ordinary conversations, but occasionally, I would hear something suspicious. The goods are ready, just waiting for the surgery date, I heard my wife say on the phone one day. This sentence sent chills down my spine. Were they really planning to harm me? I began planning how to protect myself while continuing to collect evidence. I checked all the medicine in the house, fearing it might have been tampered with. I even started considering whether I should run away from home, but I worried it might alert them. Just as I was caught in this dilemma, an even more terrifying truth came to light. I accidentally overheard my wife talking to someone on the phone, and the person on the other end seemed to be a police officer. Don't worry, everything has been arranged. No one will trace it back to you, the voice said. This discovery left me utterly despairing. Even the police couldn't be trusted. What should I do? I thought of an old friend I hadn't contacted in years. He was now an investigative journalist. Summoning my courage, I gave him a call. Old buddy, I've run into some trouble and need your help, I said cautiously. What kind of trouble? It sounds serious, my friend asked with concern. I took a deep breath and briefly explained what I had discovered over the past few days. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, followed by a sigh. This is indeed serious. Do you have any concrete evidence? I told him about the photos I had taken and the conversations I had recorded. All right, send me all the evidence. I'll look into it carefully. But you need to be careful, this kind of thing is dangerous, my friend said. After hanging up, I felt a sense of relief. Finally, someone was willing to believe me. I carefully organized all the evidence and sent it to my friend. After sending the email, I let out a long breath, feeling a glimmer of hope. But I knew the danger wasn't over yet, I needed to remain vigilant. I began planning how to protect myself while continuing to gather more evidence. I anxiously awaited my friend's reply, but a day passed, then two, and still, I received no message. I tried calling him, only to find that his number was no longer reachable. A sense of foreboding washed over me. Could he have also encountered danger? I began to regret involving him, but now, regret was of no use. Just as I was hesitating whether to report him missing to the police, I noticed a suspicious phenomenon. Every day on my way to and from work, I would see the same black car parked not far away. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, but after several days in a row, I couldn't help but become wary. I started changing my routes to and from work, but that car always seemed to appear out of nowhere. My nerves were stretched tighter and tighter, fearing that one day I might suddenly meet with misfortune. This kind of nerve-wracking existence was truly unbearable, and I began to consider whether I should take the initiative. It was at this moment that my wife's attitude suddenly changed. She became unusually concerned about me, asking about my physical condition every day. Darling, you look very tired lately. Are you overworked? She asked gently. I forced a calm demeanor and replied with a smile. Perhaps I haven't been sleeping well recently. Should we go see a doctor? I know a very good one, she suggested again. My heart skipped a beat. Why did that sentence sound so familiar? No need, I'll be fine after resting for a few days, I declined once more. My wife frowned, seemingly dissatisfied with my response. I began to suspect that she might have already noticed my investigation. To dispel her doubts, I decided to take a risky move. The next morning, I pretended to feel unwell and struggled to get out of bed. What's wrong? Where does it hurt? My wife immediately asked with concern. I clutched my stomach and said weakly, my stomach hurts, maybe it's gastritis acting up. My wife quickly said, let's go see a doctor. We can't delay this. I hesitated for a moment but eventually nodded in agreement. We arrived at a private clinic. The doctor was a middle-aged man wearing glasses. When I saw his face clearly, my heart almost stopped. I had seen this face before in the photos from the warehouse. I suppressed my inner panic and let the doctor examine me. It looks like mild gastritis. I'll prescribe some medicine, and you should rest for a few days, the doctor said. I nodded mechanically, my mind already racing with plans on how to escape this place. I need to use the restroom, I said to my wife, then quickly walked out of the consultation room. I didn't go to the restroom, instead, I rushed out of the clinic. Fortunately, I managed to escape. I flagged down a taxi and headed straight to the police station. I had to report the incident immediately, this might be my last chance. However, fate played another cruel joke on me. As soon as I entered the police station, 2 officers stopped me. Sir, you are suspected of defamation. Please come with us, one of the officers said. I was stunned, completely unaware of what was happening. What defamation? I'm here to report crime. I shouted. But the officers ignored me and immediately restrained me. I was taken to a detention room, filled with despair and fear. Is this the end? Has my investigation come to this? Just as I was sinking into despair, a familiar voice reached my ears. Hey, old friend, didn't expect to see you here. I looked up and saw my missing journalist friend. How are you here? I asked in shock. He smiled bitterly and said, same as you've framed. We began exchanging information and soon uncovered something shocking. They're not just breaking the law, they're connected to high-level politics, my friend whispered. I gasped. No wonder even the police couldn't be trusted. We must escape and continue our investigation, my friend said firmly. I nodded and began to plan the prison break with him. After observing for a few days, we finally found a possible breakthrough. During a meal delivery, we took advantage of the guard's inattention and stole his keys. Late at night, we carefully unlocked the cell door and slipped out quietly. Fortunately, the guard in the duty room was dozing off. Holding our breath, we tiptoed past him. Finally, we successfully escaped from the police station and hid in an abandoned factory. The place was overgrown with weeds, and rusted machines were everywhere. We decided to stay here temporarily and continue our investigation. However, fate gave us another unexpected surprise. While exploring the factory, we discovered a hidden basement. Inside the basement was a fully equipped operating room. We searched cautiously and soon found a large amount of evidence. Excitedly, we flipped through these documents, feeling that victory was within reach. However, just then, we heard footsteps. Just at that moment, we heard footsteps. Someone's coming, my friend said nervously. We quickly hid behind a stack of boxes, holding our breath. 2 security guards walked in, looking around. I thought I heard something here just now, one of them said. The other replied, probably just rats. This kind of place is full of them. Our hearts were practically jumping out of our throats, terrified of being discovered. At this critical moment, a sudden commotion erupted. Before we could react, a group of fully armed officers stormed in. Interpol. Nobody move, a loud voice commanded. My journalist friend and I exchanged shocked glances, hardly believing our ears. The armed officers quickly took control of the situation, and the 2 security guards were subdued on the spot. We cautiously stood up from behind the boxes, raising our hands. We are here to investigate. I hurriedly explained. An officer who seemed to be in charge walked over, scrutinizing us. Who are you? Why are you here? He asked sternly. We quickly introduced ourselves, explaining our identities, how we got here, and how we discovered this basement. After listening, the officer nodded and signaled his team to lower their weapons. What evidence have you found? He asked. We immediately handed over the documents we had found. The officer quickly scanned them, his expression turning grave. This evidence is crucial. You've done well, he said. I let out a long sigh, finally feeling a glimmer of hope. The police officer began organizing a thorough search of the factory to look for more clues. My journalist friend and I were subjected to detailed questioning. We told the police everything we knew, including the suspicious activities at the hospital. Several hours later, a large-scale operation was launched. The hospital, clinics, and several private residences were simultaneously raided. A large number of suspects were arrested, including my wife. Hearing this news, my emotions were mixed. I felt a sense of relief, but also an indescribable sadness. The officer informed me that I needed to go to the police station for further questioning. Upon arriving at the station, I was taken into an interrogation room. As I waited, the door suddenly opened. My wife, looking haggard, was brought in by 2 police officers. 5 minutes, the policeman said before leaving the room. An awkward silence filled the space. My wife kept her head down, seemingly unable to meet my eyes. Why? I finally broke the silence, my voice trembling. She looked up, tears welling in her eyes. I had no choice. I am not doing this voluntarily, she choked out. I let out a cold laugh, refusing to believe her lies. They threatened to kill you if I didn't cooperate, she continued to explain. My heart sank. Could it really be true? Please, forgive me. Help me, she pleaded. I stared into her desperate eyes, torn inside. How can I help you? I asked cautiously. Find me a good lawyer. I'll tell him everything I know, she said urgently. I stayed silent for a moment, then slowly nodded. I'll try, I said, though my mind was already plotting something else. A look of relief washed over her face, as if she truly believed me. Just then, the policeman returned and announced that time was up. As my wife was led away, she glanced back at me with a deep, lingering look. I maintained a calm facade, but inside, I was sneering. After the police left, I immediately requested to speak with the officer in charge of the case. I revealed my wife's plea and laid out my plan. I said, I can pretend to help her, but in reality, I'm collecting more evidence for you. Upon hearing this, the police officer's eyes lit up, clearly intrigued by the proposal. This could be very dangerous. Are you sure you want to do this? He asked. I nodded firmly. In the days that followed, I began a dangerous double game. On the surface, I frequently visited my wife and hired a renowned lawyer for her. Secretly, however, I closely observed her every move. Soon, I noticed some suspicious signs. My wife seemed to be maintaining contact with the outside world through some means. I reported this discovery to the police, who intensified their surveillance. During one of my visits, I deliberately showed her sympathy and understanding. I believe you didn't do this willingly. Give me some clues, and I'll help you, I said. My wife hesitated for a moment, then began to reveal some information. She mentioned the names of several key figures and some secret locations. I feigned shock and sympathy, but secretly took note of all the details. After leaving the prison, I immediately relayed the obtained clues to the police. Based on this new information, the police launched a fresh round of investigations and arrests. Soon, more criminals were apprehended, and the scope of the case expanded further. However, just as the case was about to be solved, something unexpected happened. My wife suddenly realized that she might have been betrayed by me. During a court hearing, she suddenly broke into hysterical screams. You liar! You never forgave me, she pointed at me and shrieked. I stared at her expressionlessly, though my heart was a whirlwind of emotions. The judge had no choice but to call for a recess and have my wife removed from the courtroom. In the subsequent trial, I appeared as a key witness. I detailed the entire investigation process and all the evidence that had been uncovered. My testimony became crucial for the conviction, and the main criminals were sentenced to heavy penalties. My wife, too, could not escape the law and was sentenced to many years in prison. At the sentencing, she glared at me with resentment, her eyes filled with hatred. Yet, I felt a sense of relief. Finally, this nightmare was over. After the case concluded, the police arranged a new identity and residence for me. I started a new life, but my mind remained unsettled. The faces of the victims often appeared in my dreams. I decided I had to do something for them. Such a tragedy must never happen again. Years passed, and my life seemed to have regained its calm, but deep inside, a flame that could not be extinguished continued to burn. The faces of the victims still frequently appeared in my dreams, their painful cries echoing in my ears. I knew I could not simply let it go. I had to do something for them. Thus, I decided to become an anti-trafficking activist, embarking on a new journey in life. I traveled around the world, attending various international conferences, calling for attention to this serious issue. At one international conference, I was passionately delivering a speech on stage when I suddenly noticed a familiar face in the audience. It was a middle-aged man, his eyes betraying a hint of unease. My heart skipped a beat. Where had I seen this man before? After the speech, I discreetly followed the man and saw him sneak into a hotel. Hiding in a corner, I watched as he secretly met with several others. Their conversation was hushed, but I managed to catch some keywords: organs, transport, buyers. My heart raced. Could it be that what I had uncovered years ago was just the tip of the iceberg? With this dreadful suspicion, I embarked on a new round of investigation. I sifted through a vast amount of information, visited countless informants, and gradually pieced together a shocking revelation. It turned out that what we had cracked back then was merely a small organ trafficking ring, behind which lurked a vast transnational criminal network. This network spanned the globe, involving multiple countries and regions, with tens of thousands of innocent victims falling prey to them each year. I felt a wave of dizziness. Had all our efforts from back then been in vain? No, I couldn't give up just like that. I had to continue the investigation. I contacted the Interpol officers who had participated in the original investigation and reported my findings. They were shocked by my discoveries and immediately formed a task force. I was invited to join this task force as one of its core members. We worked day and night, trying to uncover the true face of this organization. However, just as the investigation hit a deadlock, I received an unexpected message. My wife, who was in prison, requested to see me, claiming she held crucial information. I hesitated for a long time but eventually decided to meet her. When I walked into the visitation room, I saw a gone woman. The pride and arrogance that once filled her eyes were gone, replaced by deep exhaustion and remorse. I know you might not believe me, she said hoarsely, but I've really changed. I looked at her coldly, my heart filled with doubt and mistrust. I heard you're investigating a larger criminal network, she continued. I can help you. I scoffed. Why would I believe you? She took a deep breath and then uttered a name that shocked me. It was the key figure we had been chasing but could never confirm. My heart began to race. Could she really know something? How do you know this name? I asked urgently. She smiled bitterly. In prison, you hear a lot of things. I began to waver. Maybe she really could help us. If you're willing to trust me, I can tell you more, she pleaded. Let me help you. This is my chance to atone. I remained silent for a long time before finally nodding. And so, my wife and I began a dangerous collaboration. The information she provided was indeed invaluable, helping us make a breakthrough. We gradually peeled back the layers of this criminal network, discovering that it was even more vast and complex than we had imagined. Our cooperation grew more seamless, and the investigation progressed rapidly. We ventured into the lion's den, risking our lives to gather evidence, and finally brought this massive criminal network to justice. The mastermind was apprehended, and countless innocent lives were saved. Our efforts had finally paid off. Due to her contributions, my wife was granted a reduced sentence. Years later, as I watched her walk out of prison, I whispered, we'll each start anew, without disturbing each other. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. We both needed time to heal the wounds of the past.